Today on the Energy is... No, I'm teasing. That's not how we're going to start the episode, but it is the Energy is Love podcast. Obviously, I always say obviously, because if you aren't aware of that at this point, I guess you can continue to listen. Thank you very much for listening. So, energyislovepodcast.com, iTunes, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. Go listen on our website. You can go listen just right on the website itself. If you go to our website, click on episodes, you'll see them all right there, and you can listen, download, do whatever you need to right through the website. Also on the website, we have all of our sponsors listed. So you click on sponsors, drops down a tab. You get to then click on any of them and go find their information. The one I want you to go there and click on right now is the New Consciousness Expo. Coming up April 22nd, Saturday, April 22nd, from 10 to 6 is the New Consciousness Expo at the Southtown Expo Center. It's here in Utah, so if you live here in Utah, then I expect to see you there. If you don't live here in Utah, then I guess you get a pass. Just a small pass, though. Saturday, April 22nd is also Earth Day. So celebrate Mother Earth. Come out to the New Consciousness Expo, which, by the way, is an amazing event that has so many different things. Rattle off here in just a little short promo for it. I don't even know how to list all the different things. But if you could imagine the most amazing metaphysical, spiritual, new age, healthy living event, conference, whatever you want to call it. So mark your calendars. It's coming up real soon. April 22nd, 10 to 6 all day Saturday, Southtown Expo Center. This episode is also brought to you by our new sponsor. We've got a new sponsor for the podcast. It is essentialoilaccessories.com. So we've talked about essential oils on the podcast before. If you are into any sort of kind of stuff that we talk about, or even not that we talk about, just I'm sure at some point you've heard of essential oils and how beneficial they are for you as a person, for your family, for anybody that you could possibly know. We love essential oils. My wife and I use them all the time. Wonderful, wonderful things. Well, you can find everything that you could possibly need for your essential oils. Organizers, necklaces, bracelets, diffusers, continuing on with the list of all the things that they have. Go to their website and check it out. Like I said, they've got everything that you could possibly need to accessorize and to use and dispense and to enhance your life in the process of using essential oils. So go check them out. You can go to our website, click on the link there. You can go straight to their website. You can go find them on Facebook there, all that kind of fun stuff. But go check them out. New sponsor for the podcast. Big shout out to essentialoilaccessories.com. On today's episode of the podcast, I got a chat with Crystal Doty. So I'm a big fan of Crystal. She's a really neat lady. She's a lot of fun to chat with and talk to. She's got super good insight into so many different things. She is the author of What Would Angels Do? It's a guide to different archangels and things like that. It's a really, really good book. And if you haven't checked it out, I suggest you go check it out. We did have her on the podcast way back in the day, but it's been a long time since she's been on. So I was looking forward to the chance to catch up and learn what she's been doing and what she's been up to. So during the episode, we talk about a lot of stuff. And really, just like any other episode, we just got into some really wonderful conversation about a variety of different topics. So go to her website. It's clarityistheway.com. That's where you can find all of her information. You can find her contact information as well as click on everything that she's got there so that you can find and follow and keep up to date with what Crystal is doing. But for now, thank you very much, Crystal, for taking the time to do the show once again. And you folks get to sit back and relax and enjoy a wonderful, beautiful episode of the Podcast for the Universe with my wonderful guest, Crystal Doty. Here we go.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The Podcast for the Universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Well, thank you, Crystal. Here we are again.
Yay, I'm back. It is an honor to be here. I'm loving your podcast. I love being able to support what you're doing. And of course, it's an honor to be here. So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm excited to kind of find out what's going on and where you've been lately.
Yeah, well, as you know, I wrote What Would Angels Do a year ago. This month is when it came out.
Year ago, is it April? It's April now, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And actually, okay, so a year ago next month is when I officially launched it. And it's been an amazing year. It really has. I am into book 2, writing What Would Goddess Do? And that has been incredible experience as well. Completely different than this one. When I wrote What Would Angels Do? It seemed like it happened in a night. The goddesses are taking their time.
It's a little bit longer of a process.
Yeah.
That's typical of a goddess, though. That's my super stereotypical man right there.
There you go. Well, and true to form, they are being. So it's really great. And at the same time, though, I should also say I am writing 2 other books. I've got another series going. So the What Would Angels Do? What Would Goddess Do? Is in my first series of books, Watch Me Rise. And I've got a second series that is geared towards modern mysticism. People who are the modern mystics, they are wanting to pull mysticism, spirituality, magic from the past, from the ethers, and apply it to our present day lives. So what that looks like is I've got a book on how to build and brand your spiritual business, how to date as a spiritual person, just kind of the things that we're dealing with today in our lives, but using, our spiritual heritage, to help us maneuver our modern day lives. So I'm all over the place. I am writing like a crazy woman. So
If I'm not mistaken, the What Would Angels Do? That was your first book, right?
Yeah.
You had never written anything before.
Correct.
Do you feel like you've kind of caught the bug now and you just like the process so much?
Yes, absolutely. I love writing. I mean, I'm obviously wanting to do it full time because that's where I'm headed. And so, yeah, it is one of those things that, everybody says they're going to write a book and then they don't. And I'm just here to go, just do it. Just do it. And you don't have to be 100% perfect. I've got mistakes in my book that I still catch. There's some things that I wish I would have written differently. I mean, and that's the other thing. I think that writers think that it has to be this absolute perfect piece. And, it's perfect when it's ready to go. I mean, I felt the push, the angels going, just publish it already. And, it's just seemed to have helped so many people, even though there might be a typo.
Yeah.
So just do it because once you do it, you learn a lot about yourself. I learned a lot about myself during the editing process, having editors tell me that, hey, this isn't coming across the way you wanted it to, when you are edited and you learn how to speak better, you learn how to deliver a message better. I mean, there's so much development that happens when you put out a book. So just do it. Everyone needs to do it.
Do you find after having written the first one, now the process, you've already got that under your belt and you've got that experience and that kind of idea of what it actually takes to write a book and to author and to put it out and all that kind of stuff? Is it a little bit easier now?
For sure. There's a lot of research that I had to do because I self-published. Mm-hmm. And there's so many different ways you can go about doing that.
Describe that. Somebody out there that doesn't really understand the difference between, going through a publisher as opposed to self-publishing.
Yeah, I want to say that I chose easy, to be honest, in my perspective. I did not want to go through the submitting my book to a publisher and whether or not it will be approved or not or, anything like that. I just really felt the call to put my information out there. So I went through CreateSpace, which is Amazon's self-publishing company, and it was very easy. It was just, you've got your document, you've made all of the edits and corrections. I do highly suggest that you invest in an editor, probably more so than you would invest in a publisher. I would think that that's number one because your content, if it's really good, your things will sell. And so it was literally like uploading, my book to CreateSpace and picking out what my cover was going to be. And once it's on Amazon, you're out there and then you just do all your self-promoting. And for those of you who want to know more about that, you can wait for my book, How to Build and Brand Your Business. It's coming out. But, I learned what works and what doesn't work. I learned strategies that are a waste of time and money and other ways that really are beneficial. And I know that most people that are just putting out a self-published book, they're, most of us are not having a ton of money to invest in a lot of, self-promotion. So there's some really cool things that you can do to help you. But what I learned was once you get about 25 positive reviews on Amazon, Amazon will start to suggest your book to people who are, ordering and buying books. So my first goal was to get those 25 positive reviews. And it's exciting. I mean, I got that. And the majority of them, I don't even know who the people are, which I was like, oh, all my friends will do this. But it's more meaningful when it's people that I don't even know, because then you know they're being authentic.
Yeah.
Not that my friends wouldn't be, but just having that feedback from people that I don't even know was really exciting. So if you are looking to put your book out there, one of the best things, and I don't know if it's my ego or not, it's really nice to have people say nice things about my book.
Take that little bit of extra time, huh?
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
the same thing for a podcast too.
Hint, hint.
Yeah.
For sure. Now that I've been through that, I think that I'm more sensitive towards, taking the time to tell someone that they're doing a good job or that I liked their book and just giving them that review. So now my book is a suggested book on Amazon, and that's really exciting. That was what I wanted to accomplish in the first year. So now I'm heading into the year of my book turning a year old, and I can say, cool, I did that. Now I can move on to the next book and get that out there.
So with not having gone with a publishing house or with a publisher, you also don't have to worry about any of the proceeds, right? You're not necessarily having to worry about divvying anything up to people that you've hired to go and do the book and all that kind of stuff for you.
That's true. I mean, there is a printing fee that Amazon charges you to print the book, but you can pretty much mark it up what you want. And then I have my book in a couple local bookstores, in Utah, and I was just out in Arizona. There's a couple that will start selling them out there too. And, you just work your own book deal. What kind of profit do you want to make on your book? Word to the wise, obviously nobody becomes a writer to make millions of dollars. It's not like you're making a living on selling your books yet, perhaps, when you first put it out there. It's really just a beautiful ride. And so I just suggest people do your best, at managing what you want to get from your book without overpricing it. And I do believe that publishers have a place. And I think that if you are someone who is willing to do the work and get yourself out there, it's a lot more beneficial to have a publishing company approach you and say, hey, we've noticed you've sold a ton of books, and you're doing really great. I think in the New Age world, Hay House is probably, or Balboa Press, those are two that most people want to be affiliated with. And they're very strict on that. They definitely want you to be doing the legwork, and it's easy to be noticed if you are doing the work and you're getting the success back that you deserve.
I had a thought. I get so pissed off when this happens. I have something that pops into my head.
Yeah.
I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah.
I'll sit here and think forever.
But for anyone who's listening that wants a publisher, I'm not bashing publishers at all. I would say go with your gut, go with your intuition if you feel like that's the route you want to go. What I learned is that getting a publicist is your best bet, to find somebody who's going to go to the publishing company in your name for you. It's just kind of that old adage, when somebody else talks about you, it comes across a lot better than you talking about you.
Yeah.
And so
that's what I was going to talk about. Like, I think that and this is a perfect example of where, there's now the ability through technology and the way that everything's moved and the way that we are so far advanced in regards to the different things that we do, you have the ability to essentially publish your own book incredibly easy for the most part. And now people can buy your book anywhere. And that's amazing. Whereas even, 5-10 years ago, it would have been much more difficult. And things like publishers and anything in that realm of, it's the same thing like with podcasts, where anybody can make a podcast and put it out there and it can be listened to. And you no longer have to be restricted to the forms of media that are kind of big and present and commonly used or known, right? So in the realm of writing a book and becoming an author, you would have to go through a publisher, unless it was you carrying your manuscript around and handing it to people for the most part.
True.
And so I think it's really amazing how that's changed. And then I think it also correlates to so many different things in the world as a whole, as well as like in the New Age community and spirituality, where there are tenets and things that were there for a reason in the past that worked really, really well, that had a time and a place, and now they're just kind of no longer needed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I will say that because it's so easy to get information out there, the consumer's inundated. And, I think that most people's fears of putting themselves out there, whether it be a podcast or even a Facebook Live or, writing their book or whatever, is that there's so much inundation. There's just, everybody is inundation a word?
I think so. I think I used it correctly.
All right, cool.
I knew what you meant.
I'm a writer. Just kidding. That doesn't mean I know words. There's just so much out there that I think that people are worried about, or I should say, most of the people I talk to that want to write or put themselves out there, they're worried about the competition. They're worried about what else is out there. And I always just say, this is a wonderful way to up your game. The market never lies. When you have good stuff, they'll buy it. When you have crappy stuff, they won't. So the good way to know where to go or how to change or grow is to put yourself out there and see what the marketplace wants. What are they asking for? What are they loving? And it's not to change your message by any means, but it's a really good way to grow. It's a good way to get feedback, basically, is if you, like I have a client that's like, I put stuff out there and nobody's really biting. And, she's being consistent. She's doing a lot of the stuff. And it's like, well, at some point you've got to look at your content and just say, what do I need to do? This is feedback. And again, just like when I was edited in my book, the editor's going, I know what you're trying to say, but when someone's reading it, they're not going to take it that way. And, going, okay, I need to really look at what I'm really putting out there, not what I think I'm putting out there. And that makes it exciting for me. That feedback helps. It's a challenge that I like to rise to. I can put out a crappy YouTube video, like one view or something, one like, and I'm like, okay, I will not cover that content again, or maybe I'll recycle it in a year, and see if people like it then. But it's fun to maneuver and swim through this sea of information and just, try to figure out what people are really hungry for and give them what they're asking for and what they're wanting.
I almost think sometimes as well, because like you said, there is so much content, right? Mm-hmm. Not just in the space of books and podcasts and everything else, but there's just so much stuff out there for people to try to take in that it seems really difficult to break through that hump where, and we do that in that space where we create something, like you said, even if it's as simple as a Facebook Live video, where we want to make sure that it's being heard or that it's being seen or somebody's absorbing that information. If it's good information and it should be out there, do you know what I mean? That's what we want. And if it's just us seeking fame and glory and, 1,000 views, then that all just isn't worth it. But I think that sometimes people don't even know what the hell they want. Do you know what I mean?
This is true. And I think that that's when you start dabbling, again, just if you're somebody that wants to put out content, just start doing it and give people options, and see if you can trigger in them what they're looking for. People, again, the marketplace never lies, that people will tell you what is talking to their heart, what they agree with. Things that go viral are usually things that people get really passionate about, so they're craving that. So I always just, you just have to be looking and watching and appreciating what
and I think as well, at the end of the day, if you're doing stuff that speaks true to who you are, that you feel very passionate about, obviously it doesn't matter who's watching or how many likes it's getting or how many books you're selling on Amazon. It's all just a matter of do that stuff that you're really passionate about that really makes your heart smile.
I think you nailed it on the head there for sure. I'm sure most of our listeners are already thinking yeah, perfect.
How old are you? That's a terrible question to ask you on a podcast. I just realized.
That is so hilarious. So on the drive here, that's so funny. For some reason, I was thinking you were going to ask me that. So
I have a reason behind it.
Okay, well, I have a reason, I guess, for thinking that. I don't know. This is a big year for me.
Okay.
I turned 40 this year.
Okay.
I know that's weird because, I feel like I'm 28.
Mm-hmm.
But something about 40 for me. I always said when I was 40, I wanted to have the best body I've ever had. And I can almost say that. I think that by October, by the time I have my birthday, I'm going to be there. I've been really working hard at my physical health. I had some landmarks that I wanted to make by the time I turned 40. And I'm really proud of myself because I have taken the time to do that. And, here it is April. I've got till October and I am like a woman on fire right now. I think that turning 40 is going to be the best birthday I've ever had.
So the reason I ask, thank you for answering. And I think it is funny that you thought about that question on the way here. I think if we look at our lives, right? First off, when we're children and then teenagers and early 20s and through every phase and kind of stage of your life, you always think about yourself in the future and you always kind of future cast where you're going to be and what your life's going to look like. Now, you're going to turn 40 in October. Is your life anything remotely close to what you thought it would be when you were 20 or when you were 15 or even when you were maybe 30 or whatever?
Well, first of all, let me just be thankful that there was no social media when I was younger.
Yes.
Because I thought I knew everything at one point. I really did not do a lot of planning, and that if I could go back, I wish I would have. But, my story in a nutshell was that my parents decided to kind of ship me off to my sister's house when I was 13. I just was stopped parenting, being parented very young. And then I got pregnant in high school.
How much older was your sister?
She was 12 years older than me, and she was already married and kind of established. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was a series of circumstances that led them to make that decision. But I still really suffered with some abandonment issues and things like that for a long time. And so when I got pregnant in high school, I didn't really have a plan for long term. It was just what I could do that day. Like, what bills do I have to pay? Where can I live that's safe? Where can I raise my child that is safe? I was a child raising a child. And so I think I lived most of my 20s just really living in kind of a present moment, trying to get through and trying to survive. And I was a lot in survival mode. My big awakening happened when I realized that I was never orphaned. I really have some amazing, beautiful, heavenly parents, that never left my side. That was the biggest turning point for me, is connecting to God and Goddess and my father and my mother and the source of everything for my life. And once that became solid, it was easy to start to make plans from that point. But to be honest, it has not been that long. And, really my 30s, the beginning of my 30s was me just kind of figuring out and understanding what that relationship between me and my parents, my heavenly parents, really was about. I will say that I'm just now starting to make plans. So when you ask, did I see myself here? No, I can honestly say I didn't, because I didn't know where I was going to end up. I really didn't. I think when I was a little girl, I just really loved to make people happy. We traveled a lot when I was young, and my mom said that I would walk up and down the airplane just wanting to make people smile. And so perhaps at some point in my life, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Perhaps I wanted to just make people feel at ease and happy and make them smile. But as far as having a plan or wishing that I was something, it's like I went to school to become a nurse, but it's not like I had these big aspirations to stay in the medical field. I went on to get a master's in, nutrition and bioenergetics and homeopathics, but I didn't have any huge aspirations to rule that kingdom at all. I just did what was in front of me, and I ended up here.
Congratulations. Kudos to you. I think it's, as perhaps, because I'm 35, so I guess you and I are kind of in the same generation in a sense, right? Mm-hmm. And in the generations behind us and the ones that are in front of us, each generation, I think, always has something that they have to deal with, right? In a societal big kind of scope and viewpoint. And I think for the most part, especially speaking from my own experience, there wasn't anything overly, like, we didn't have to survive the Depression. We didn't have World War II. Granted, we've had wars consistently for the past 30 years or whatever the case may be. We've been in some kind of armed conflict. But we didn't have some big, huge thing that really defined a generation. And I think because of that, outside of own personal stories and experiences and lives that people have led, I think because of that fact that we haven't had something profound that's affected society in such a massive way, we kind of float and we kind of stay in this space. And so I think about myself back when I was like 20 years old, right? I had the same thing where I thought I knew everything. I think that's very, very common and normal and wonderful and amazing, because I remember how smart I was, and then you just realize you're really an idiot. But, I would think about myself now at 35 years old and think about how I would feel so productive and how I would have, my life put together, and I would have all these things kind of organized, and I would have a house, and I would have a family, and I would have all of this stuff. And now that I'm 35 and I have all of those things, right? I have a family, I have a home, I have, relatively speaking, my life in order and productive. I still don't feel like it. I still feel like I'm, in 10 more years or when I turn 40, and I think that our generation, or people that are, anywhere from this age of like 30 to 45 to 50, I think we are kind of becoming more who we are supposed to be and more content and happy and at peace with life much later in life. And maybe it's always been that way. I don't know. But it seems like, there's nothing wrong with turning 40 and feeling like you really have your life together, or feeling like you're really moving towards where you're supposed to be going. And I think that that's happening later and later and later in life for people. And maybe it's always been that way. I don't know. But it seems like that's kind of a common thing where, and you see it like in Hollywood with celebrities and things like that, where they comment on the fact that like Jennifer Aniston's 50 years old. Like, who cares how old Jennifer Aniston is? But yet she's had this huge successful career that's all happened, since the time that she was like 35, 40 years old. And so I just think it's really fascinating and interesting. But then I always pick apart that concept or that idea or that dynamic, especially in my own space. And why do I feel like I still don't have, not necessarily everything that I want, but I still don't feel 100% comfortable in my skin. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is the evolution process that we're all kind of going through right now. And I think we've always been evolving into, just better humans. We're obviously not in the dark ages anymore. We're not throwing bones at each other. And, there's a lot to our world that's still kind of like that, but we're evolving. And on an energetic scope, I believe that we as a human race are evolving very fast right now. And so the feeling of not reaching some promised land is normal under these circumstances of just, we're always on the leading edge of the next thing. And I think it's okay to not feel completely settled, to always feel like there's something else that you can go for, something else you can reach to, towards some other evolution of your own self. And I think even as a society, it's okay to continue to explore what our evolution looks like. Especially in our time, technology has taken off. Our society is, people's ideas, and, we have people that are thinking like Einstein now, that weren't thinking like that before. We have people thinking like, out of the box people back then. It's kind of like our norm now to be more just on the leading edge. And very often I come across someone that I'm either doing a reading for or, even in conversation, and they're feeling bad that they haven't reached their promised land. They're like, I've wandered the wilderness, right? I've done all this and that, and I have not reached that place. And I always say, well, congratulations. That's not the point. I don't think that you'll ever reach a promised land. And I feel that mentality can be very scary because, for one thing, let's say you did everything that society told you to do. You did A, B, and C, and you think you're in the promised land. What do you do when evolution comes knocking at your door and gives you some weird-ass challenge that you've got to overcome? What do you do when life asks you to grow? What do you do when you have to now start, praying for manna to fall out of the sky, so to speak, again? You start resisting that call. You start resisting the challenge. You start saying, no, there is no growth. I made it. I'm in my promised land. I'm in paradise. I did everything I was supposed to do. And that leads to non-growth, which is, in my eyes, death. It's spiritual death. It's emotional death. When you say, no, I've done everything I need to do, I've made it. And you put like your, shovel in the sand, and this is it. This is the place. This is where we're going to be. That is very much like trying to do that in the middle of a river. Life is flowing. We are evolving, where there's always a forward movement. And you're either going with that flow or you're in resistance to it. Whenever you resist it, it's painful. You just kind of get slammed by life if you don't, if you don't continue to just go with it. So I totally get what you're saying. And I think that my old mentality would be telling me, gosh, Crystal, at 40 years old, you should be way more established than you are. Because by under no means, I don't want anyone that's listening to this think that I even have my shit together. I do not.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I think that I think we feel like we get to a point in life where we are going to have our shit together. And then at each kind of milestone and each kind of next level, it's like, oh, I've got a little bit more of it together, but there's still this huge pile over here that's just complete chaos. And I'm sitting here as we're talking, and I'm sitting here thinking about it. My guess is that the reality, regardless of who you are in life, whatever your status is, whatever your success level is, my guess is nobody ever feels like they have all of their shit together. And I think if they do feel that, they're probably lying to themselves in a sense. And even like in the dark recesses of our minds, even when we feel very content and happy, I think there's always this unsettled, quiet storm that, you know, we are always kind of in that place of evolving and evolution and moving forward. Life
is like laundry. You are never done. You're going to have to wash the bullshit you're wearing today. Yeah. You know what I mean? There are destination points. Don't get me wrong. There are milestones. Again, going back to the river analogy, you know, you are gaining experience and you are gaining wisdom. So perhaps the only difference between me at 40 and somebody at 20 is I've just been around longer. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make me more smarter. It doesn't make me, you know, obviously more articulate.
Wiser. And,
right. Yeah. I mean, I've gained some experience and I know what works for me and what doesn't. And, you know, I might have some insight, but, you know, I might be further down the river, so to speak. But I like the idea that life is a journey because that also gives people who are starting maybe a new endeavor later in life permission to do it. You know, it's never too late to start that dance class, to learn how to paint, to do the things that you wanted to do. And perhaps you're entering a phase of your life where life might be, you know, your river's slowing down a little bit. And you do have time to maybe indulge in those new exciting things that you wanted to do, but we talk ourselves out of it, that paradise mentality. Well, wait a minute, I've arrived, I'm 65, you know, who am I to start writing now or speaking now or, you know, start that hobby now? And it's like, who are you not to? Dude, you've got miles and miles and miles of river ahead of you. And, you know, my philosophy is as long as you are here on this planet that is always evolving, that is always moving forward, that is always growing and expanding, and as long as you are standing on the edge of new things happening, until you're not here, you are here to just grow and expand and move and shake and do your thing.
I totally agree. And I think that's an important thing to speak about and to throw out there is the fact that, you know, you're never out of time. It's always a good time to start that new thing, to quit that old job and go to the job that you want, to try doing those things that you're afraid of, because that's the other thing too. Like, I think the dynamic of, you know, I think about my parents' generation and their parents, my grandparents, and the idea was that you found your job, your career, whatever it was that you made money at, and you did that for 20 years or 30 years until you retired. And then you got to live your life of relax and, you know, enjoyment and vacationing or whatever the case may be. But you had to commit that 20 years of hard work and determination and showing up and working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, and really dedicating yourself to that before you got to the end and you got to experience joy and happiness. And it's not that you couldn't have a job that you were joyful about, but I think that dynamic is so incredibly gone. It's not even really present anymore. There's just wisps of it where people still think in some way, shape, or form that we have to do that. And the reality is we don't have to do that in any way, shape, or form. And so many people today aren't doing that, where you'll have multiple careers throughout your lifetime. You'll have the experience of, you know, I worked 14 different jobs during my 20s, finally found something that I enjoyed when I was 30, quit or left that when I was 35, and all these different things that'll happen. But what I find interesting, I've got an 18-year-old daughter, so she's getting ready to graduate, she's getting ready to go to college, she's getting ready to go out and do all that kind of stuff that you do at that age. But trying to explain to her or express to her that concept or idea that she doesn't have to figure out what she wants to do for the rest of her life right now. She doesn't even have to have a clue what she wants to do for the rest of her life right now. And the fact is, what she chooses to go to college for, or what she chooses to do, you know, for a job or a career once she leaves college, most likely isn't going to be something that she does for 20 years.
So true. So true. I tell people in their 20s all the time, this is your chance to mess up. Your 20s should be you trying and failing at everything.
We're still fucking up in our 30s too.
Maybe you didn't fuck up enough in your 20s. You know, on that note, I think that, again, it's the evolutionary process. And I talk about this in What Would Angels Do at the beginning of the book, where I talk about the evolutionary turn point that we've made. That lifestyle that you described that our parents and grandparents lived totally worked for them. Totally worked. They were happy doing that. Women were happy in their role. Men were happy in their role. Everybody was just doing what they were told, and they were happy with that. But you look at, again, evolution. We have so many more opportunities than they did. They think about the industries that were available to them versus the industries that are available to us now. And now that we have this amazing free market, you can be an entrepreneur at everything you do. You can go and make beaded bracelets and sell them on Etsy. There's just so many more opportunities for us now. So it's not so much that one generation was better or anything. It's just it worked for them because that's what they had available to them. And this works for us because we've created all of these different avenues that we can go into. Working from home. I mean, that really was not a thing for women in the 50s. I mean, how is a woman going to work from home? She wasn't selling anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Perhaps things out of her garden at a farmer's market or something like that. But we have so many more opportunities handed to us that's why we get to be all creative and excited. And it's important, I think, that we don't look and judge the generations. We just look at it as that absolutely worked for them and this is working for us. And things have changed so quickly, so some of our heads are spinning. But I don't think that there was a right or wrong way or a good or bad way to live. I just think that we did what we did according to what was in front of us then.
I totally agree. I keep saying that because you say wonderful things. I'm like, oh, I totally agree with that. Good job.
That is awesome.
I have something for you.
Okay.
So that you said you're writing the new book.
Yes, I am writing the new book.
What would goddesses do?
Yes.
So this is a really interesting dynamic, right? Maybe it's not an interesting question or topic I'm about to bring up, but I'm sitting here thinking about it and I'm like, first off, that's going to be cool and I'm excited and you'll have to come back on and talk about it when you're done with the book.
Definitely.
But what if somebody were to write a book? What would gods do? Like
that would be fun too.
Well, I think that especially in the New Age community, right? The inner goddess and the goddess awakening and goddess arising and women embracing their goddess and all this empowerment of women. And I think it's beautiful and I think it's wonderful and I think it's much needed and important. However, can you imagine if a man, and maybe there is a book out there, similar title or something like that, but if a man were to write a book and title it What Would Gods Do? And the whole intention and purpose, and I don't know if this is the intention or purpose of your book, but the whole intention and purpose is to empower men and have them invoke their inner God and their strength and all those kind of different things. Like I can only imagine what that would be viewed and looked at as.
I would be sad if it was viewed anything other than awesome because I'm writing about what I know about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a whole lot about men's empowerment. I know it needs to happen because I don't feel like men are empowered at all. I feel like that there have been males who have abused their power, but that's not empowerment. Those are not actions that come from an empowered man. That's actually coming from a lack of power, wanting to overpower somebody else because they feel powerless. I would love for somebody to write a book like that. But, what would goddess do is what I do know. It is really about having to, really, I hope that men read my book too, because I'm doing the same thing with that book as I did with the archangels. I mean, basically what I did is I took 15 prominent archangels and I personified them. And I said, here's what they would be like if they were human. Here are the kind of lifestyles that they would live. Here are some of their ideals, perhaps, that they would support. And I feel like because we don't have a lot of strong role models, you know what I mean, in our society. And I think that part of the breakdown of the genders has been that we don't have that tribal initiation to our manhood or our womanhood. We don't have those tribal leaders who have harnessed themselves and are able to mentor us. We're all just kind of like figuring it out, And so I looked to the archangels and then I looked to the goddesses to help me understand myself, as a woman in this world. What kind of strengths am I allowed? Can I have? Who's going to show me what my potential is? And so I looked at goddesses in the history. Greek goddesses and Roman goddesses and Egyptian goddesses and Mayan goddesses who really embodied themselves, even Christian goddesses like Mary and Mary Magdalene. But to answer your question, I personally would love that book. And if it was really written with the intention that you said,
yeah.
This is what would Apollo do as a man on this earth? What would Zeus be like? What would probably not Anubis. He's the god of death. I don't know if that would be so great. But, like these gods that we have in our stories in our history. They're there for a reason. They're there for us to look at. They're there for us to learn from. The only difference is that they're like stories that don't apply to us today. You know what I mean? Like, I'm, as a single mother, trying to pay my bills. So like, what's Isis going to do to help me with that? You know what I mean? Isis, the goddess, by the way.
Yeah.
And when I started to look at her as like, hey, this is the kind of attributes I know her to have. What would she do if she was in my space? How would she create success? And that just like empowered me. I was like, oh my gosh, she would be a rock star. You know, she would be like this glamorous rock star. And I just basically let them tell me, you know, I would meditate. What would you do in 2017? What would you do in this year with these challenges? And I think that bringing them in, you know, out of the storybooks, maybe bringing them into like, you know, our present moment, hopefully a woman will read that book and say, I am just like Athena. I am just like, you know, these goddesses, and they would do incredible things. And if they can, I can.
Do you think that there's a big, I mean, I know that there's a big, oh my goodness, split isn't the right word, a big divide or a big, a big space, we'll say, between feminine and masculine right now on the planet and people and in general. I feel like I don't know how to word this in such a way where I'm not going to sound like a dick, so I'll do the best that I can. But I feel like I feel like I'm treading. Okay, I'll stop like worrying about what I'm about to say.
Yeah, just say it, because it's all good.
Well, I feel like women in general, and in general is a terrible way to classify women, and in no way, shape, or form do I think that there's absolutely anything wrong with women. But I feel like because of the way that women have been persecuted, and just simply the dynamic of the world for the last 5,000 years, 10,000 years, when it comes to men and women, I think now they're at a point where they're trying to take some of that power back, and that's such a silly term as well. I don't like that term, but they're trying to embrace the inner goddess and that strength that they have inside of them, which I personally feel like is massively stronger than anything a man possesses or has, because I've seen like super strong women energy, and it's really, really good stuff. But I feel like it's still out of bounds, and I didn't do a good job of explaining it. But I feel like the women's movement, or feminism in general, goes way, way, way past the point of balance, where they do need to empower themselves. They do need to take back some of that energy that has been so convoluted and shitty over the past 10,000 years. But I think what they've done, and not everybody, of course, but I think it's like there's a trend or a thing where they go way, way farther past the point where they need to go, simply to just feel like they have to stand up and be heard. And I'll speak from my point of view only. I'm not speaking for men in general in any way, shape, or form, but I feel like what it does is it almost, when I say it turns people off, it's almost like it's too much, where you just kind of doing such a terrible job, Crystal. It's like you tune it out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying. So I can say this because I'm...
Good luck. Yeah, I mean, no. I'm really glad that you hear what I'm saying, because I have no idea what the hell I just said.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's almost been an extreme opposite or like an extreme... kind of like the pendulum went from like one extreme to the other, where women were like so suppressed, and now it's like they're to the other opposite extent. And there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of hate, and there's a lot of just, backlash. Personally, we all understand why it's happening. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't care who you are. I don't care, what your beliefs are. At least you can understand why it's happening. I mean, this is the first time in our history that we're not getting killed for being like that. Right. But I do believe that that it's part of the balance. I feel like, let's take it down to your own personal life. Sometimes if you've been an extremist in one way, life will create a situation where you almost have to be an extremist the other way just to balance out. It's the pendulum swing. And so we're all in this together. There's no, she's a feminist, I'm not, you're not. We're all in this together. And there are some of us in a collective that are going to go to that extreme to help balance us out. There are some things that need to be said. And there needs to be, just this balance. What I am looking at is that extreme sometimes demasculates men, and it also creates a lot of fear and hate that those of us who are light workers are very sensitive to. We're all about the balance, but extremes usually really bug us. We're like, oh my gosh, you guys, really, can we just like forgive this and let it go and just be peaceful. But we have to understand that all of us together in this like global ocean, the way of things is that we really do need to let that extreme happen. And I do believe that there will be, it's kind of like somebody dropped a pebble in the feminine energy and those ripples just went way out there. But just like ripples, they will hit a bounce back point. They will come back. That's how I see this, is that there was, that pebble was probably just, you're not going to get killed this time. So that gets dropped into this water of feminism, of female energy, and it just expanded and grew into what it was. Also, when I see women who are in a lot of pain, because they're also carrying the pain of their ancestors, perhaps they have a line of DNA of women who have just been murdered over and over and over again. And they might be feeling that in their blood. I do believe that that's a thing, that they are just, they're here to work that out for their ancestors, work that out, that anger out of them. Kind of like this has been something that's been under the ground, the surface for so long that it's just bubbling up. So for my advice for anyone who is also feeling what we're talking about is just become an observer of it. Watch it. This is absolutely normal. For any, I feel like the suppression of female energy was a disease. I feel like it was a disease of the mind. And when you have a disease, it's festered and festered and festered and festered. And now we've ripped off the bandage and it's going to ooze. And you could apply this analogy to anything that's going on to politics right now. We've had a lot of under the ground disease type of energy, just that gross negative stuff that we keep putting bandages on. And today, because of the lifestyle, because of the evolution, those bandages are being ripped off in the form of awareness as we're looking at it. We're looking at the problems. We're looking at the issues. And everybody's like, ooh, gross. This is awful. This is the worst thing ever. It's oozing. It's disgusting. It's diseased. Yes, let everybody look at it. Let everybody see it. At some point, we'll start cleaning it up. And again, I really believe in the bounce back. I feel like it has to happen. You have to look at the ugliness. You have to scream and shout about it, perhaps. But do I see the anger and the rage happen into generations to come? Probably not. I think that we are raising children in a different way, where these women that are raging, they're probably doing it for all of us. They're kind of like holding that space of what needs to happen, of what needs to come out.
Well, I like the way you described it and explained it. It was much more eloquent and like easier.
Well, I hope that it was understandable as well, because it is one of those topics.
But that idea that, that extreme has to happen, where if we were on one end of the spectrum for such a long time, that in order to find balance and to find that happy medium, that space in the middle, we have to go to that opposite end. And, I can personally think about times in my life where that's kind of happened to me in different ways, shapes, and forms, where I was way over here on one end and then eventually swung to this. I mean, that's a really, really good way to describe it, and I like that.
Think of it this way, too. If you were underwater for just a second, you'd come up and you'd probably be breathing normally. But if you were underwater for a really long time and you finally came up for air, you'd be noisy. Right? It wouldn't be pretty. You wouldn't be all elegantly coming out of the water. You would be like screaming and coughing and choking. And that's how I feel is kind of going on in our whole society, is that there's so many things that have been underwater. And specifically, if we want to talk about female energy, has been under the water, choked, drowned, just you're down there. And so now that nobody's holding us down anymore, everybody's kind of, this energy's rising to the top. It's not coming out in a very graceful way because it's been under the water for a very long time. So grasping for like air and choking and crying and yelling and like, I can't believe you kept me down there for so long. But then pretty soon she gets her breath back. She comes out of the water, everything, balances out. And I am always calling for men to just understand what's going on. I understand that men in this generation were not holding us down. And I understand that women in this generation were not holding us down, but it was held down.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we're coming out. It's not elegant. It's not as graceful. We're used to women being elegant and graceful. But when you've been holding your breath for 5,000 years, it's not very pretty when we emerge finally.
Do you think that there could possibly be a reason behind, because I think there's rhyme and reason to everything, right? Everything serves a purpose, the existence of whatever the case may be. But do you think that there may be a reason for the fact that feminine energy and women in general have been kept down and persecuted and, do you know what I mean, kept underwater for so long, that it could have served a purpose?
I mean, yeah, I look at maybe our tribal ancestors who valued female energy as, the counterpart. And to me, female energy, if I were to classify male and female energy just in a really easy, high-level way, male energy is the exhale. It's the energy of giving. And female energy is the inhale, or the energy of receiving. And when we're breathing, we're perfectly balanced in our male and female energy. And so that giving energy that male energy has can be as pleasant as exhaling, or it can be as forceful as blowing and just, being very forceful. And so to me, when I look at, to answer your question, I had to define that first. Why was feminine energy suppressed in the way it was? I think that all discord in our world always comes from one thing, and it's fear. And at some point in our history, the exhale became more important than the inhale. The force, the output became more important than the inhale, the ability to receive and the ability to absorb and reflect. And I do believe that when female energy is in its most purest and powerful is when she is being a receiver of light, and when she's reflecting the goddess or that higher energy, and she's being her intuitive self, and she's gathering information from source. It's female energy. And when in my version of our story, this is not everybody's, but in my version of story, at some point somebody got scared of that power because they looked at it and said, this isn't me. I'm not a receiver. And they're receiving things that I don't. And so I need to shut that off. I also think that sexual energy had a lot to do with it as well. I think that men, in some point in our story and in some part of our history, became very intimidated by what women could do sexually to them, and they started feeling a little out of control. And so it was like, we better get this under, control, and so, yes, I think that there are many reasons, but if I were to take it down to one thing, I just feel like at one point men got scared of women and started to put them under, to depower them, unpower them. I don't know how. I'm going to make up words tonight. Unempower them, yeah. And
what about on a really deeper cosmic level, like on the expansiveness of the universe, in the way that energy is all intertwined and connected, and the energy that we have on this planet, Earth itself, plays a massive role in the energy of the universe, just as my energy does, your energy does, everybody, blah, blah, blah. But what if there was some reason behind feminine energy having to be stifled in a sense, or to be swung to the opposite end of the spectrum so that male energy could then come forth? And the reason behind that had some deeper cosmic level of balance within the space of the universe as a whole, as opposed to just our planet.
I get what you're saying, and absolutely everything's a possibility to me. And I have to say that as you're talking, what comes up for me is the question, why would a supreme being like God let this happen? Mm-hmm. And I think it's because I have the kind of relationship with God that tells me that he wouldn't let us get into a place that he couldn't get us out of. And so perhaps this had to happen for a reason, and whatever reason that might be, I always just think, there was a supreme being in charge that, I don't want to make women mad at God, but we have to just say the faith that I have is that it wouldn't have gone to a point where there was no return. And we're seeing that. Obviously, there's a return now.
Do you believe in the singular God?
I believe in multiple deities, actually, but I do believe in one supreme origin that we're all coming from. And so I will say yes and no, where, I feel like I have a mother, father, God, but I also acknowledge that they are from an origin that we're all coming from.
So the origin that we're all coming from, do you feel like it is a being or a conglomeration of energy?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
You don't know? You're not sure?
I'm really plugged into my heavenly parents, and I know that there is a source above them. And when I'm supposed to know what that source is, I'm sure I will know it.
Do you ponder it? Like, is it something that you question or think about, and not question in the sense of like, I need answers, damn it, for my miserable life, but just ponder
Not specifically.
No.
But I will say that I think that when this is how I'm starting to understand these other realms, is that sometimes things appear when you're not looking. The search is always on, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I just feel like I do get glimpses of that, even though I'm not really that curious about it. I know I come from it, and I know that it's light, and I know that it is all-encompassing love. I've seen glimpses. I understand what it's about and where it's coming from, but I couldn't say it was a person or being or anything. I think that in my humanness, there's something about it that is the mystery, and I'm actually very okay with that mystery.
I think it's good to be okay with it. I mean, I hope people out there that are listening, for me, I'm always constantly thinking way, way too much. But I think at some point, and even me personally, when I get to that point, I am okay with just the unknown, with the not knowing. I mean, it's the Energy is Love podcast because I think that being, that thing, that light, whatever we stem from, we're all connected to and through and from, is love. And I don't have to understand it past that point. Mm-hmm. Do I think there is something past that point? Very much so, because I think that everything's super infinite, and there's like bigger infinities. Like even the infinity that we think of has an infinity that's bigger than that. And so I think that there is more than just energy is love, and that's simple enough. Mm-hmm. But that's all that I need now.
Yes.
And that gives me peace, that gives me calm when I need it, that gives me the ability to kind of move through this life of crazy chaos when things happen, and find that middle ground, and find that calm in the river, and the opportunity to just be present and be happy and be take a deep breath.
Yeah. And I also think, and I'm just going to put this out there, and I hope this doesn't piss anybody off. Well, if it does, then I must be doing something right. But I'm very careful of defining that origin, because the minute that we start putting our humanistic perceptions on it, we start limiting what it can do for us. And what I know is that because it's an origin of infinite possibilities and like you said, infinity, the minute that I start putting it in any sort of box, calling it male, calling it female, calling it, giving it personality, I limit what I will allow it to do in my life. I know that it is the source of miracles. It is the source of everything happening to me in my life. So if I start saying, that origin is this way or that way, I might start to develop a belief that it cannot do certain things based on like a persona that I've given it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So for me, I like the idea of having a mother and father, because I can go to male energy. I can go to female energy. I can go to these things that when I need to feel safe, protected, when I need wisdom, when I need nurturing. But above them, I know that that is the source of everything, and I don't want to put a limit on that. I don't want to put a persona on that. I don't want to start saying that origin is this way or that way, or prefers these things, or wishes to be worshipped in a certain way, or prayed to in a certain way, because when I'm needing it, I might not receive from it what it truly can give me in my life.
So this came up on a earlier podcast. I think it was the last one. I don't remember which, because I lose track of them. But the idea and the concept, I think that we as a species, as a race, as people on this planet, I think we have some aspect of like our encoding in our DNA, like some part of us that keeps things small, that does label and minimize and put things within a box, including ourselves. And even the idea and the concept that you can't do that, or that we shouldn't do that, because then we limit ourselves to the potential and the possibilities. But yet we still do it in so many different ways, some really subtle and small, and some really big and obvious. But that idea, because I think that because we are connected to that infinite source of whatever the hell it is that we want to call it, I think that we have absolute, complete power to do anything and everything. Meaning, just anything, right? Anything that has ever been thought up, anything that's ever been created, anything that's fantasy, anything that we just chalk it up to just somebody's imagination. I think we have the potential to do all of those things. But I think the reason that we don't do those things is because of that encoding within our DNA. And that in itself serves a purpose for some reason. And this is just me continuing to perpetuate that idea and that concept of keeping things small and putting them into a box. But I do think that there's a reason behind that aspect of human nature. And I think that we made it that way for this experience, that because we came to this planet and we had this experience as humans and blah, 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 blah. I think that small little tiny thing that we did and that we put into the system, so that from that point forward, everybody born after that point had this thing, kept us small simply because of something, for some reason that served some greater purpose in the scope of the universe that we can't understand or see. But I think that it's very, very important. Yeah. And I think that possibly why we're at a point now in society and in culture and in the year 2017 where we are starting to reach outside of that and question that and look past that. And maybe it's been that way for the past 1,000 years, which is obviously just a blink of an eye. Not even like a blink, like the thought of it. It's not even the thought of a blink. But
very minute.
I think that perhaps the reason we're starting to come to that ground where we not just think about that dynamic, but also question it and look outside of it. So now we're no longer keeping things small and putting them in a box. We're allowing for the space outside of the box. I think that too serves a purpose, where perhaps maybe that encoded part of our DNA is slowly shifting and changing and being recoded in a sense, in some way that we can't understand, and will take us to the next level of, not even the next level, just the next space of serving the higher purpose of the spin of the cosmos and the galaxy and the universe.
I definitely, and that to me is the evolutionary process that we're in. We obviously needed to be able to categorize things. We needed to be able to understand things. We needed to be able to label things. This is part of survival. But when we try to do it to God, we limited what is unlimited. And so, yes, part of the evolutionary process in my eyes is this amazing thing that's happening in our brains. Where, you honestly, in talking about the evolution of brains, you can look at somebody's brain from, thousands of years ago, these mummies or, the science, okay? And they will, show you that we look different. We behave differently. We are definitely evolving. And part of that perhaps is that the kind of lives that we have created require less of that organization, less identifying, less putting it in the box, less labeling. And so part of our DNA is being uncovered, the limitless part of us. And it's exciting. And we're all kind of just waking up to that limitless possibility. That's an exciting concept. And I agree, there's a purpose for it all. That our ancestors didn't necessarily need that. They were very much into survival. And they actually had a level of understanding about God that they weren't labeling that energy. When we go back far enough in time, they were okay with the mystery. You look at the Mayans and the Egyptians and the people in Greece, they understand that there's a part that they're not supposed to understand. And I think that level of acceptance of the mystery, again, it just keeps possibilities open for us, keeps that alive for us. So
yeah, I think it's super important.
For sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chris.
I love it. So can we do something fun with my book?
Absolutely.
I had this idea. I thought about, I am someone who is a big believer in the law of attraction. I do believe that everybody who's listening today really needed to hear whatever it is that we were talking about. And I love randomness. This is why I love cards. I do cards. I teach tarot readings. I do a lot of that because I love how when you randomly open a book or when you randomly draw a card, you really do allow the universe to just, it's like you look in a mirror. So I'm just going to kind of open the book in a random place and let's just kind of see what comes up.
And she totally is, by the way.
Yeah, but yeah, you can see.
She's just flipping through.
It's almost like I'm shuffling the deck, but I'm just kind of flipping through.
None of this has been predetermined in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, true. He's going to see me in live, just kind of, and I'll even put that into the mic so that everyone knows that I'm flipping through. And I'm just asking that the angels kind of just stop the book and that whoever's listening really gets to hear this. So I'm just stopped pretty much in the middle of the book, page 100, and we're talking about Archangel Michael. And they're just kind of leading me to this right here. It's funny because I know this part of the book. We're talking a little bit about leadership, about, just kind of maybe empowerment. And we've talked a lot about empowerment today. And so I'm just going to read a paragraph, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Leaders lead from the front, which means they are willing to first do what they want their followers to then do. If you're the head of a business, a household, store, group, organization, etc., you must be willing to show your team what must be done in order to ensure everyone's success. Think of King Arthur and the knights in his round table. In his search for the Holy Grail, Arthur doesn't just send out his army with a list of orders. He journeys with them, leading his knights by example and including their wisdom and knowledge in his experience. Zig Ziglar said, "You will get all you want in life if you help enough people to get what they want." To me, this is the round table mentality. The leader isn't leading for the purpose of having followers. He's leading to pave the way for everyone to find their strength and their own success. I do go into a little bit of evolution talk in this, where, historically we've cried for leaders. We've been like, someone lead us. But when somebody ever steps up, we crucify them. I say here, Joan of Arc carried the energy of Archangel Michael when she showed the unwillingness to hide or renounce her ability to see and hear angels and be guided into war under their mighty influence. And look what happened to her. Jesus was put to trial and then crucified for similar reasons. So, sometimes it's hard to step into that leadership role, but I think right now in our evolution process, it is very important that we understand what true leadership is really about. We are no longer wanting to just follow someone blindly. We want a round table mentality. I think that we all want to sit around and do exactly what your podcast is all designed to do. It is just, let's hear everybody. Let's see what kind of pieces of wisdom that this person is getting from source or this person has gained through experience. See how we can put that into, our society, into our lives, whether it be personal or global. And, that's why I think that this whole book, it's funny, I wrote this book last year before the elections, before all of that.
Before Trump was our president.
Yes, thank you. And I actually wrote in the beginning of the book, the reason why our politics look like a bad reality show. I used those words before I even knew that he was going to be elected, is because we're being pushed to be a round table. I really would love to see people stop looking at what's going on in the Hill. And I know that freaks people out. They're like, well, if we're not looking, then shit's going to happen. Guess what? Shit's happening anyway.
Yeah.
And it's time that we start being the leaders, that we start, we're the head. They are the tail. We're the ones that make the decisions. But we act like we're the tail. We act like we're the ones being wagged. But like I told you at the very beginning, the market never lies. The market always wins. Majority always wins. And if the majority of the people are continuing to put their focus on the hill, we're going to be wagged all over the place. I want a round table. I want enlightened spiritual CEOs. That's why I'm writing the books that I'm writing. I want enlightened people to start managing what's going on in their house more than they're concerned about what's going on in the White House. Like a bratty little kid wanting attention. When you stop paying attention, they stop. First they get louder.
Yeah.
But they stop. They start understanding that what they're wanting isn't coming from these people anymore. The fame, the control. I want us to just be kind of our own unruly round table of knights. And that's why I'm passionate about getting, my message out there and writing my books, is because I feel like that's where we're headed anyway. I think that evolution is going to get us out of, that poor leadership and everybody just kind of blindly leading the literate. We're all literate. In fact, I think the people in charge are more illiterate than we are. So there's my rant.
When are you having, what's your projected release date for the new book?
I do not have one. But if you do want a date from me, well, that sounded really weird. If you do want any, I'm launching my mentorship. I have a 6-week mentorship that's launching May 1st. And that mentorship's amazing. I've been doing it for probably almost 3 years now. It's a 6-week course with me where we talk about, expanding your intuitive abilities, getting you connected to your angels, helping you to clear negative energy, basically the spiritual fundamentals that I feel like I continually talk to my clients all the time. I was like, hey, these are just 6 principles that keep coming up in our lives right now. So I'm just going to create a mentorship, and I will just kind of mentor and walk you through the process. And it's a really fun thing. You do not have to be present. It's all, I give you videos and workbooks and exercises. There's a process that we do every week. And then the other component is there's a private Facebook group that I do Facebook Lives weekly in that. So I'm able to continue walking you through that. And, it's just a really incredible process. So May 1st, if anyone's interested, you can find that on my website, clarityistheway.com.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Crystal, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun.
It's
I could
fun,
talk
isn't
all
it?
night with
I
you.
know.
It's a lot of fun. I really appreciate you asking me to come. And, hopefully we pissed off enough people and made other people feel wonderful. And that's just how it goes.
Well,
So.
it's always challenging. I always want somebody out there listening to be challenged in some way, shape, or form so that they're left with something to ponder and think about after the episode is over. So,
Well, I can't imagine anyone would come into the podcast not wanting that.
No.
So.
well, thank you.
Thank you. Love, light, and angel blessings, everybody.
And everybody go out and have a beautiful, beautiful, wonderful day.
Life is flowing. We are evolving, where there's always a forward movement. And you're either going with that flow or you're in resistance to it. What do you do when life asks you to grow? What do you do when evolution comes knocking at your door? And I just did what was in front of me. Life is like laundry. You are never done. You're going to have to wash the bullshit you're wearing today.